I don't stand for corrupt judges. The viral courtroom showdown. That shook America, the courtroom was dead silent, until Pam Bondi, the fearless U.S. Attorney General, refused to stand for the judge. Every eye locked onto her as she crossed. Her arms, her voice slicing through the tension like a blade. I don't stand for those who sell justice. The judge turned purple with rage, slamming his gavel so hard the sound echoed like a gunshot. You're in contempt of this court, he roared, but Bondi didn't flinch. No, she fired back. I'm in contempt of corruption. The crowd erupted. Cameras flashed. And in that moment, the trial wasn't just about a drug syndicate anymore. It was about exposing a judge on the take. But how far would Bondi go to? Prove it? And what would happen when the powerful men she was targeting decided to strike back? Pam Bondi had spent countless sleepless nights poring over case files, witness statements, and financial records, all pointing to one undeniable truth. Hawk Enterprises wasn't just another pharmaceutical company. It was a sprawling criminal empire responsible for flooding American streets with lethal doses of fentanyl. The numbers were staggering. Thousands of overdoses, families torn apart, communities decimated. But what made Bondi's blood boil wasn't just the drugs. It was the brazen way Hawk Enterprises operated with impunity, shielded by a network of bribed officials, compromised law enforcement, and, most alarmingly, judges on their payroll. The deeper Bondi dug, the more horrifying the picture became. Shell companies in the Cayman Islands, offshore accounts moving millions, whistleblowers turning up dead. This wasn't just a case, it was a war. And Bondi knew that to win it, she'd have to take down not just the traffickers, but the corrupt system protecting them. Her first major break came from a terrified informant, a mid-level accountant for Hawk Enterprises, who had slipped her a USB drive before vanishing. The files were heavily encrypted, but buried within them was a bombshell, a muffled recording of a man who sounded unmistakably like federal Judge John Grayson discussing a payment. The words were fragmented, but the meaning was clear, $500,000 in exchange for keeping things quiet. Bondi's hands shook as she listened. Grayson wasn't just any judge. He was the one assigned to oversee the Hawk Enterprises trial. If he was dirty, the case was doomed before it even began. She had to move fast. The morning of the hearing dawned, with an eerie tension. Bondi arrived early, her sharp blue suit a deliberate contrast to the dark wood and somber atmosphere of the federal courthouse. She knew what she was about to do would be career-ending, or worse, if it backfired. But she also knew that playing by the rules would mean letting Grayson bury the case. As the courtroom filled, lawyers in their pressed suits, reporters with their cameras, curious spectators whispering in the back, Bondi sat perfectly still at the prosecution's table, her fingers resting lightly on the briefcase containing the USB drive that could blow the whole trial wide open. Then came the moment. The bailiff's voice boomed, "All rise for the Honorable Judge John Grayson!" The scrape of chairs filled the room as everyone stood, everyone except Bondi. She remained seated, her arms crossed, her gaze locked onto Grayson as he swept in, black robes billowing. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Grayson's steps faltered for just a second before he recovered, his face tightening. He took his seat, glaring down at her. "Miss Bondi," he said, his voice dangerously calm, "you are aware of the protocol in my courtroom." Bondi didn't blink. "I am," she said, her voice carrying across the silent room. "But I don't stand for those who sell justice." The reaction was instantaneous. Reporters lunged for their recorders. The defense attorney shot to his feet, shouting objections. Grayson's face turned a mottled red as he slammed his gavel, the sharp cracks echoing like gunshots. "You are in contempt of this court," he roared. Bondi didn't flinch. Instead, she reached into her briefcase and pulled out the USB. "No, Your Honor," she said, her voice steady. "You're the one in contempt of the law, of the people who trusted you, and of every family that's lost someone to Hawk Enterprises' poison." She turned to the stunned courtroom. This recording proves Judge Grayson took a bribe to protect Victor. "Hawk, and today I'm playing it for all of you," chaos erupted. Grayson screamed for order, but it was too late. Bondi had already handed the USB to an FBI agent waiting in the gallery. As the recording played, Grayson's voice, unmistakable, negotiating the bribe, the judge's face went slack with horror. Within minutes, federal agents were escorting him out in handcuffs, his career and freedom collapsing in real time. But Bondi knew this was only the beginning. Victor Hawk wouldn't let his empire fall without a fight. Victor Hawk wasn't a man who tolerated loose ends. When news broke that his puppet judge had been arrested, live on camera no less, he didn't panic. He retaliated. Bondi had expected pushback, but even she was stunned by the speed of Hawk's counterattack. The first warning came less than 24 hours after Grayson's arrest, as she walked to her car after a late night at the Justice Department. A shadow moved in the alley across the street, a glint of metal. Instinct made her duck just as a bullet shattered her driver's side window, embedding itself in the headrest where she'd been sitting seconds before. The second shot missed her by inches, ricocheting off the pavement near her feet. She didn't run. She didn't scream. She stood perfectly still, scanning the rooftops, her breath steady. "Hawk," she muttered. But the physical attack was just the opening move. By morning, the media storm had begun. Hawk's allies, well-paid pundits and politicians, flooded the airwaves, painting Bondi as a reckless prosecutor who had staged a coup against an innocent judge. Op-eds accused her of fabricating evidence. A senator from Hawk's pocket called for a congressional investigation into her abuse of power. The narrative was clear. Pam Bondi was the villain, not the hero. Worse, the threats weren't just against her. An envelope arrived at her office containing a photo of her elderly mother's house, taken that morning. No note, no demands. Just a silent promise. "We can reach anyone you love." Bondi stared at the photo for a long moment before sliding it into a file. She wouldn't be intimidated, but she also wouldn't be reckless. That night, she called Sarah Clean, her most trusted FBI contact. "We need to move faster," she said. "Hawk's scared. That means we're close." The congressional hearing was supposed to be Bondi's downfall. Hawk's allies had stacked the committee with senators who owed him favors. The questions were designed to trap her, to twist her actions into something corrupt. But Bondi had spent her career preparing for this moment. She walked into the chamber, wearing the same blue suit she'd worn in court, a silent message. When the committee chairman, Senator Robert Callahan, a man whose name appeared 3 times in Hawk's financial records, began his opening remarks, Bondi didn't even glance at her notes. "She already knew how this would end, Miss Bondi," Callahan sneered. "You bypassed legal protocol, publicly accused a federal judge of crimes without due process, and destabilized the judiciary. How do you justify this?" The room fell silent. Bondi leaned forward, her voice low but razor-sharp. "I don't justify it, Senator. I'd do it again." She reached into her bag and slid a USB drive across the table. "Because while you've been lecturing me about protocol, Victor Hawk has been paying you. This is the proof." The recording that played next didn't just implicate Callahan. It exposed a dozen others, voices plotting, money changing hands. A system rotten to its core. By the time it ended, Callahan's face was ashen. Reporters were already sprinting for the doors, phones pressed to their ears. The hearing dissolved into shouting, gavels pounding, senators scrambling to distance themselves from the wreckage. Within a week, Callahan resigned. Hawk was indicted on federal racketeering charges. And Bondi? She stood on the steps of the Capitol, sunlight glinting off her blonde hair as cameras flashed and supporters cheered. But that night, alone in her office, she opened another envelope. This one held a single line, handwritten. "You won't win the war by winning one battle." She smiled faintly and tucked it into her desk. "Your turn. The fight isn't over, Pam. Bondi took down a corrupt judge. She survived an assassination attempt. She exposed a network of bribed politicians. But what happens when the enemy isn't just one man, but an entire system built to protect itself? If you were in her shoes, knowing the risks, seeing the threats, would you keep pushing? Or would you walk away? Drop a comment below. Should Bondi take the fight to the next level, or has she done enough? And who do you think she should target next? Stay tuned, because in the world of power, corruption, and justice, the next battle is already brewing.